We'll now call the January 30th Special City Commission meeting to order, and I'll call roll. Mayor Jelka, Commissioner Larson.
Here.
Commissioner Peck.
Here.
Commissioner Perney.
Here.
Commissioner Vanier. I will now accept a motion for acting mayor.
I move that Lucy Larson be acting mayor.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Same sign. Commissioner Larson's now presiding.
Okay, I'll open the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, this is a good test to see if I've been paying attention what happens here every Monday. I believe today we are going to be talking about adopting for the City of Salina the Disaster Debris Management Plan. Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
If I may, I'd like
Sure.
to give a little bit of an overview. Let me start by saying staff doesn't take lightly calling special meetings, despite the fact that the last two times Jason's been out of town, I've called you into a special meeting. But we did give this consideration, and I think Mike will get to it in the blue sheet in terms of the significance of why we're needing to take action today. And I haven't even had a chance to tell Mike, but looked at the FEMA website right before I came down, and the president's yet to declare Kansas as a disaster, although in speaking with FEMA reps shortly before that, staff found out that it's imminent. They just don't know whether that's happened yet. An additional clarification that's called out in the blue sheet, and I think Mike will get to it, but in the communication that I sent to you, I incorrectly communicated that this action would also make us eligible for regular time expenses for personnel. The pilot program makes us eligible for that, but the debris management plan is limited to the 5% reimbursement, and Mike will get to that in greater detail. And lastly, I want to commend Mike for the work that he's put in. The timing of this is such that we knew of these requirements, but there was no example plan that we could use as a starting point to draft, and we received that on Friday. Mike's worked Saturday, Sunday, into Monday night, and then I reviewed the document this morning, and they've made the edits, and they're being copied as we speak. So he's going to give you a verbal overview, and the plan should be forthcoming here any minute. Okay. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. City staff has learned, as Mike has said there, of a public assistance pilot program for FEMA, and that this program will be running from June 1st, 2007 through December 31st, 2008. The pilot program consists of 4 key elements. The first is to provide grants on the basis of estimates of larger projects up to $500,000. The second element is to provide an additional 5% federal cost share not to exceed 100% to applicants that have a FEMA-approved debris management plan and at least 2 pre-qualified debris or wreckage removal contractors identified prior to the disaster. The third element is that FEMA will allow the applicant to retain any revenue from the salvage of recyclable materials from a disaster as an incentive to recycle. That could be such things as white goods, or if we were doing something with chipping tree limb debris and we were selling that, we could keep the profits or proceeds from that. The fourth element is that FEMA will reimburse the straight or regular time salaries and benefits of an applicant's permanently employed staff that perform debris-related activities. The key element addressed by the proposed adoption of the disaster management plan is the second element listed above concerning the additional 5% federal cost share. To qualify for the additional federal share, the City of Salina must have a debris management plan in place prior to the presidential declaration. And as Mike just said, is that is imminent. It could happen at any time. We anticipate this to be very soon. And that's the reason for calling the meeting as quickly as we had. We wanted to make sure that, that we met that requirement. Upon City Commission action, the plan will be sent to FEMA for their review and approval. FEMA's review and approval of the plan prior to the presidential declaration is not required. Staff has had ongoing conversations with FEMA regarding the adoption of the plan and has advised us of the Junction City plan that is a approved plan as of last week. What we have done is that we have provided you, or we will be providing you very shortly with that document. At this time, staff estimates that debris disposal expenses could be approximately $1 million or greater. Based upon these expenses of $1 million, an additional 5% would provide the City of Salina with an extra $50,000 in federal reimbursement funds. And based on that, staff recommends the adoption of Resolution 08-6486, adopting the Salina Disaster Debris Management Plan. And what I'd like to do is to give you a little bit of an idea of the elements that are in the plan, to give you an idea of that. The plan itself is about 72 pages long, so it's quite extensive. And that, but basically, these are the types of things that we have in the plan to give us some direction about how to handle debris issues in the situation of a disaster. As we said, this plan is modeled after an approved FEMA plan for Junction City. Takes into account the procedures that we're currently performing in the debris removal process for the city, so we're incorporating the things that we're doing right now. It also expands to additional things beyond what we're doing right now to be able to help us to be able to do a better job of tracking the processes and making sure that we're coordinating in a more efficient manner. So it helps us to be able to improve upon what we're doing. The plan outlines the roles and responsibilities of various functions and persons. There's a great number of people that are involved in this process in different levels of government and also internally within the city, and that the plan helps to define who these players are and what their responsibilities are. It addresses health and safety issues. It also provides an overall approach establishing the importance of the planning process. The plan also outlines the priorities of clearance, collection, and disposal of debris. One of those is in the area of being first responders, to be able to be out there, to be able to clear the roads, to make sure that emergency vehicles, police, fire, ambulance can be able to travel through the city. Also that we have utility companies, be they power or water or sewer, have the ability to travel to locations where they can be able to be of service to the public. The plan also discusses recycling and diversion options for us and ideas. Those could involve the possible recycling of white goods, HHW, household hazardous waste materials, and the diversion of yard waste materials or tree limb debris to burn those. So we're not really putting those in the landfill. We're basically burning those up to reduce that volume. There are a number of locations identified in the plan as temporary storage, disposal, and reduction sites. These are mostly located at our city parks. I've discussed this with our Parks and Recreation Director, and we've identified locations that could be used very similarly to what we are doing up on Markley right now. We have a temporary storage site to be able to get things out of the neighborhoods. So if those are necessary, we've identified different locations where we could do similar types of activities if necessary. That would be something that we would have, like let's say a tornado comes through town and that we're faced with much more types of debris or different types of debris. This would be an option that we could exercise. The plan identifies that the city landfill is the primary disposal site in a burning area. Plus, it also talks about the environmental regulations associated with such operations and things that we need to do to be compliant with our permits when we're involved in those types of operations. Also in the plan, we talk about contracting and purchasing procedures. Those are outlined of how we handle those things and what types of procedures that the City of Salina has. The dissemination and information to the public as far as news releases and keeping the public informed on what is going on It outlines processes that we'll be doing to be able to accomplish that. The plan also outlines that the city does not intend to go on to private property. We have liability issues there, so it clearly marks the fact that we'll be picking up at the right-of-way, but we won't be going on to private property to be able to collect debris, as the property owners need to be able to get that debris to the curb so that public crews can be able to, and contracted crews can be able to collect that. And the plan designates 3 contractors as pre-qualified contractors that meet city standards for performing debris removal operations. And this has been established through our bidding process, is that we've just gone through that right now where we've had a number of bidders that have bid the work, and there are those that we have determined to be qualified for that, and that those 3 contractors will be placed on a pre-qualified contractors list that we have. As Mike mentioned, is that the plan that we have has really been assembled in the last few days. It's 72 pages long, so it's quite extensive, and will, with time, need modifications and adjustments to fine-tune to just exactly what we want the program to be. Probably the first time that I see this taking place is at the completion of this ice storm cleanup event. It'd be a perfect time for us to sit down and go through the plan and say what worked well, what didn't work well, what do we need to add or change to be able to have a better plan for the next event that may strike the city of Salina. Anyway, that's a quick version of the elements that are involved in the plan.
Since you've not had an opportunity to review this in advance, I'd add one additional statement, and Mike and I have conferred on this. I'm positive he agrees, but he's drafted it, I've reviewed it in its entirety, and it represents a refinement and a formalization of what we're doing, but it doesn't represent a deviation, nor does it represent any additional significant commitments beyond what we've already done in the way of the bidding process and what we've communicated to the community. I don't want to oversimplify it, but it is a formalization of what we've already determined to be our plan in order to be eligible for the additional FEMA funding.
Is this something new then? Because evidently, what is the difference between this kind of funding and the funding that we were able to receive due to the flooding and everything? So evidently, this is called a disaster debris. Wasn't there any disaster debris during all that flooding? That, I mean, what's the difference between this and anything that?
As far as the plan goes?
Or as far as the funding that you need, well, the plan obviously is to be able to have that funding. But what is the difference, what is FEMA saying is the difference between this versus what they've done before in the past?
We have with us Brian Armstrong from Salina County Emergency Management, and he could probably answer that better than I could.
Madam Chair, thank you. Before I answer your question, I do want to commend Mike for the Herculean task that he's undertaken. I was in Topeka last week at a workshop. My deputy and I were there for 2 days. We just got briefed on this pilot program at that workshop. At that time, we found out that Junction City, Junction City was the only one that had an approved plan. I set about trying to get a copy of that plan so he and we at the county level could use that. It doesn't really do anything for Mike except lay out the format and give some ideas on what needs to be in the plan. Most of the stuff, as he said, he did based on what they are doing, because that's the best way to do it.
It's like a template.
Right. It's basically a template, because a lot of things Junction City did don't apply here in Salina. Some things they didn't do would apply.
Right.
Okay. To answer your question about the newness of this actually became effective in July of 2007. So we had already gone through the flood and the recovery from those 2 floods in May before this program even started. Okay. And the pilot program, as Mike mentioned at the beginning, has 4 phases, and we can opt in or out any of those phases. The one he's concerned about now is the 5% additional reimbursement, and that is the only one of those 4 that requires a written and approved plan, approved by FEMA.
Okay.
Okay. So that's why we didn't do anything like this during May or in June after the flood, because it didn't exist yet.
Okay. Has this been submitted to FEMA then?
No. The process, if you approve it today or once you approve it today, We will make a PDF copy of the document and the resolution, and I will email those to the point of contact in FEMA, and he knows it's coming, so he'll be ready to receive it and review it, and hopefully either late tonight or tomorrow morning, if we get it to him in time, can give us an approval, and again, hopefully before the President signs the declaration for the disaster.
So we have to have it in place before, I was under the impression that we didn't have to have it approved.
Right.
Oh, it has to be approved both by the applicant, which is you, and by FEMA.
FEMA.
It doesn't, fortunately, it doesn't have to go through state, or that would take another 3 weeks.
Well, we get conflicting information from FEMA, unfortunately, but as of
Imagine that.
as of 20 minutes ago now, FEMA indicated to us that it only needed to be adopted by you, that the FEMA approval could come after the presidential declaration.
And so we'd still be okay.
Okay.
We'd be
Right.
covered. Okay.
Right.
As long as it's submitted before.
Correct.
Because
Right.
Richard Jones from FEMA is the one that I have to send it to. He knows it's coming, and if he gets it before the President signs the declaration, he's pretty sure it's going to be approved because it's based on the Junction City plan, and it was approved.
Okay.
So unless he finds some glaring deficiency in there, that's going to be pretty much a given that it will be approved once he receives it.
Okay.
Okay.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I had a citizen complaint the other day about the debris temporarily stored at East Crawford Recreation, and I guess really a question is, why can't we get another burn permit and have a burn pit right there rather than spend all the fuel, effort, and time of loading stuff and hauling it
Well, two reasons.
to the landfill?
Two reasons for that is that one is that location is much more closely related to residential housing, and the smoke that could come from that could cause a lot more disturbance than out at the landfill, where there's less residential housing. So we've looked at that as a situation where we really didn't want to be able to make things worse. The other thing is that there have been suggestions we'd burn it on the concrete, and you don't want to do that because it'll cause damage to that. So we feel that it's in everybody's best interest to be able to take it to the landfill where it can safely be burned without causing any additional damage and disruption to residents that live in that area.
That's essentially the same answer I gave the man, and I thought it was ironic that he was one of the senior golfers, and I would see the senior golfers out there complaining about the smoke if we were to be burning right there.
Exactly.
Okay.
Another question that I had, and I think I should have addressed this to you. I have had a couple of people tell me that there are some private homes in Salina that live in private streets that would not be affected by the pickup. So they went on ahead already and had their yards and lawns taken care of. This area in Salina is about, I'm going to guess, 20 homes, and one particular home spent almost $2,000 just in what they had to clean up and haul off and whatever. Do you know if any private citizens will be able to qualify for any kind of reimbursement if they had to take it upon themselves?
At this point, the only request that the governor has sent in is for the public assistance
Okay.
to government. After a survey of all the counties involved, it appeared that the damage to individual property was not sufficient enough to meet the threshold at the state level to even request for individual assistance.
Okay.
So that's just
Which is kind of
something
what we followed during the flooding, is that
right.
correct?
Yeah,
okay.
we had the two different individual.
Right.
But at that time, we had enough individual damage to private property that we met the threshold of something like 3.4 million
Okay.
statewide in order to get that individual assistance as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Did we ever make that available? I know at one time we talked, or Jason had talked to us about, with private residence areas, having them sign basically a waiver of sorts.
Yeah, in fact, that all came to light in advance of this event, but we identified all the private street locations and attempted to make contact with representatives, if there was a homeowners association or representatives in general, and make them aware of that option. Some of them have taken us up on that and some haven't.
Okay.
In order to enter private property, you would have to have both a right of entry agreement with
Right.
that property owner and an indemnification agreement. It can be done. It was done extensively in Mississippi after Katrina, and has been done in some cases down in Greensburg as well.
But
So is provision for that in here or not?
well, as clarification, my response was with respect to private streets. And there are private streets that we've chosen not to go on because of damage and liability issues, and that's the process we went through previously to contact those associations. As Mike reported, we previously said that we're not going to go on to private property, and so this plan is drafted without the provision for that waiver.
Just public.
Yes.
And FEMA really prefers that we don't use that right of entry to get on private property, just because if we do that and they reimburse us for it, then there's some technicality in there that holds them somewhat reliable for that as well, and they would like to stay away from that. It's not to say they would disapprove it if it were in there, but they would definitely question it.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? I'll open it up to the public. If not, I'll bring it back to the Commission for action.
I would move we adopt resolution number 08-6486, adopting the City of Salina Disaster Debris Management Plan.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we adopt resolution number 086486, the city adopting a disaster debris management plan. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Any other business?
So there is no provision for other business in a special meeting if it's not,
Move to adjourn then.
okay, second.
All those in favor?
I
Aye.
guess so.
Opposed?
I got my resolution written out. Oh, well.
Okay, we're adjourned.
resolution?